The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure of crystalline walls and flowing energy fields. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from the elegant Velkari with their 6 arms and flowing robes to the collective consciousness of the Zunda displayed through their crystalline avatars. Ambassador Krelix of the Velkari stood at the center podium, his primary arms raised in the traditional gesture of grave concern. His skin shifted through colors of deep purple and red, reflecting his agitation. "The human problem grows worse," he announced, his voice carrying through the chamber's translation field. "Their colony ships continue to expand. They now control 14 star systems within their quarantine zone. 14 systems honored delegates when we granted them only 3. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. A harmonic representative, its body a cluster of singing crystals, chimed in with a sound like breaking glass. "They breed too quickly. Their population doubles every few decades. This is not natural. This is not civilized." Krelix nodded, his middle arms gesturing to activate a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the delegates, showing human vessels, human cities, human faces. "Let us not forget why we established the quarantine 50 cycles ago." The hologram shifted, showing archived footage from humanity's first contact with the galactic community. A human colony ship, primitive by galactic standards but functional, drifted through space near a trade route. A Velkari merchant convoy had detected the ship and moved to intercept, their intentions peaceful, their greeting protocols standard, but the translation matrices had malfunctioned. The humans had received only garbled noise when the Velkari ships had moved closer, using their tractor beams to stabilize the human vessel for docking. The humans had interpreted it as an attack. What happened next had shocked the galaxy. The human ship, despite being outgunned and outmatched, had fought back with a ferocity that defied all understanding. They had overloaded their reactor, using it as a weapon. They had vented their atmosphere to create thrust for ramming maneuvers. They had even donned primitive pressure suits and crossed the void between ships with nothing but magnetic boots and chemical propellant packs, forcing their way onto the Velkari vessels. 3 Velkari ships had been destroyed. Hundreds had died, all because of a misunderstanding and the humans' immediate assumption of hostile intent. "They are violent," Krelix continued, his voice heavy with remembered trauma. "They are unpredictable. They are dangerous. Every analysis of their history confirms this. They have warred among themselves for their entire existence. They have weapons designed for no purpose but killing their own kind. They celebrate conflict in their art and stories. They are, by every metric we possess, a threat to galactic peace." A Thraxian delegate stood, her insectoid features clicking softly as she spoke. The Thraxians were among the most peaceful species in the galaxy, their society built on logic and careful consideration. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we judge them too harshly. They are young. They have only just reached the stars. Given time and guidance." "Guidance?" Krelix's colors flashed bright red. "We tried guidance," honored Thrax. "We sent them our finest diplomats, our best teachers. Do you know what happened?" The humans questioned everything. They challenged every principle, every tradition. They wanted to know why we do things, not simply accept that this is how things are done. They are chaos given form. The Zunda avatar pulsed with deep blue light, its collective voice resonating through the chamber. "The humans possess something we have evolved beyond, something primitive and dangerous. They call it passion. They call it emotion. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. This makes them unstable. This makes them unsuitable for galactic society." More murmurs of agreement, more representatives standing to share their concerns about humanity. In the back of the chamber, in a section specifically designated for observers with restricted status, sat Ambassador Marcus Webb of United Earth. He was alone, as always. No other species would sit near the human section. He had grown accustomed to the isolation. Marcus was 53 years old, and he had spent the last 20 years trying to bridge the gap between humanity and the galactic community. 20 years of rejection. 20 years of watching doors close, both literal and metaphorical, whenever he approached. 20 years of seeing human children grow up knowing they were considered monsters by the rest of the galaxy. He listened to Krelix speak, listened to the delegates voice their fears and concerns about his species, and felt the familiar weight of helplessness settle on his shoulders. The hologram shifted again, showing more recent footage. A human trade vessel attempting to dock at a galactic station, turned away by security forces, human scientists submitting research papers, rejected without review because of their species designation. A human medical ship trying to offer aid during a natural disaster, warned off by military vessels. 50 years of isolation. 50 years of being called dangerous, violent, unstable. 50 years of humanity trying to prove they could be civilized only to be judged not by their actions, but by their nature. Krellix gestured dramatically. They even form emotional attachments to their machines, their dwellings, their companion animals. They weep over fictional stories. They risk their lives for strangers. This is not rational behavior. This is not how civilized beings conduct themselves. Marcus wanted to stand, wanted to shout that emotion wasn't weakness, that passion wasn't instability, that caring about things beyond pure logic was what made life worth living. But he knew it would accomplish nothing. He had tried before. His words always fell on deaf ears. The Velkari ambassador called for a vote on extending the quarantine zone, pushing humanity's allowed territory back by 3 more systems. The motion would pass. They always passed. Marcus rose from his seat and walked toward the exit. No one stopped him. No one ever stopped him. He was irrelevant to their proceedings, allowed to observe but never to truly participate. As the door sealed behind him, cutting off the sound of the continuing debate, Marcus made his way through the empty corridors toward the docking bay where his small shuttle waited. The station was beautiful, he had to admit. Graceful architecture that seemed to grow organically rather than being built. Soft lighting that adapted to each species' visual preferences. Everything clean, efficient, perfect, and utterly lonely. He passed a viewing port and stopped, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there beyond the quarantine zone was Earth. Humanity's birthplace, now a prison of sorts. Oh, humans could leave if they wished, but they would find no welcome in the galaxy beyond. No trade, no diplomacy, no friendship. His communicator chimed. A message from his daughter, Sarah. She was a commander in the Colonial Defense Fleet now, stationed at the edge of human space. The message was brief. Dad, stop trying so hard. They're never going to accept us. Maybe it's time we accepted that and moved on. Marcus closed his eyes. Sarah had been 5 years old during the first contact incident. She barely remembered Earth before the quarantine. She had grown up in this reality. Grown up knowing that humanity was alone in a crowded galaxy. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop trying. He reached the docking bay and found his shuttle surrounded by security forces. A harmonic official approached, its crystalline structure resonating with officious tones. Ambassador Webb, there has been a complaint filed regarding your vessel's presence. Station regulations require all Category Omega species vessels to dock in the hazardous materials section. My shuttle has been here for 3 days, Marcus said tiredly. No one complained before. The regulation has been reaffirmed by the council vote today. You must relocate immediately. Marcus looked at his small, harmless shuttle, then at the 6 armed security personnel surrounding it, as if it were a bomb about to detonate. He felt something crack inside him, some small piece of hope that he hadn't realized he was still carrying. Fine, he said simply. He boarded his shuttle, went through the pre-flight procedures with mechanical precision and requested clearance for departure. The station was only too happy to grant it immediately. As he flew away from the council station, away from another failed attempt at diplomacy, Marcus made a decision. He would submit his resignation. 20 years was enough. Let someone else try to make the galaxy see reason. Let someone else bang their head against the wall of galactic prejudice. He set course for the closest human outpost, a small way station at the edge of the quarantine zone. It would take 3 days to reach it. 3 days alone with his thoughts and his failures. On the second day, as he drifted through empty space, his console chirped with an incoming transmission. He almost ignored it, assuming it was official notice of another restriction, another limitation on where humans could go and what they could do. But the transmission was flagged as priority emergency broadcast, all frequencies, no encryption. Marcus opened the channel and heard something that chilled his blood. It was a child's voice, young and terrified, speaking in the Thraxian language. The translation came through clearly. Please, someone help us, anyone. They're killing everyone. Our ships are burning. Our cities are falling. The council fleets tried to stop them, but they're not strong enough. Please, we're dying. If anyone can hear this, if anyone has mercy, please help us. We don't want to die, please. The transmission repeated the same desperate plea over and over. Marcus pulled up his navigation charts and located the Thraxian home system. It was 2 weeks away at his shuttle's best speed, far beyond the quarantine zone in a peaceful sector of the galaxy that hadn't seen conflict in centuries. He accessed the galactic news feeds and found them filled with scattered, panicked reports. Something had attacked the Thraxian colonies. Something ancient and terrible. The Galactic Council had dispatched fleets, but they were being destroyed. The Velkari military, the Harmonic Defensive Forces, even the Zuunda Collective Consciousness pilots. None of them could stop whatever was devastating the Thraxian worlds. Marcus listened to the child's plea again, heard the raw terror in that young voice, and felt something stir in his chest. Not hope, not exactly. Something older than hope, something more fundamental. The Thraxians had voted for every single restriction on humanity. They had been among the loudest voices calling for the quarantine zone to be expanded. They feared humans as much as any species in the galaxy. But they were dying, and they were asking for help. Marcus changed course, heading not for the human way station but for the nearest human military outpost, his daughter Sarah's base. As he flew through the darkness between stars, he thought about what Krellix had said in the council chamber. That humans were violent, that they were dangerous, that they were unsuitable for civilized society. And he thought about that child's voice crying out in the darkness, begging for someone, anyone, to save them. Maybe, Marcus thought, it was time to show the galaxy exactly what dangerous really meant. Maybe it was time to stop trying to prove humanity could be civilized and start proving that humanity could be useful. Maybe it was time to stop being ashamed of what humans were and start using it for something good. The shuttle's engines hummed as he pushed them to maximum speed, racing toward human space. Racing toward a decision that would change everything. Behind him, the child's transmission continued to broadcast into the void. A desperate prayer cast to an uncaring universe. But Marcus Webb had heard it, and he was carrying it home. The Thraxian research vessel Curiosity drifted at the edge of their home system. Its sensors pointed toward a massive object that hung in the darkness like a sleeping giant. Chief Researcher Vixen stood before the main viewport, her compound eyes reflecting the strange architecture of the derelict ship. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Thraxian city ship. Its surface was dark, seemingly made of a metal that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Strange organic-looking patterns covered its hull, as if someone had tried to blend machine and living tissue. "How long has it been here?" Vixen asked, not taking her eyes from the structure. Her assistant, a younger Thraxian named Court, checked the sensor logs. The automated probes detected it 4 days ago. Based on the debris field around it and the state of decay, the analysis suggests it has been here for at least 10,000 cycles, perhaps longer. 10,000 cycles. The number staggered Vixen's imagination. The Thraxian civilization itself was only 12,000 cycles old. This ship had been floating in their system since before her people had discovered fire. "Any signs of activity?" she asked. "None. No energy readings, no movement, no responses to our hails. For all practical purposes, it is a dead hulk." Court paused, his antennae twitching with barely contained excitement. "But Chief, the architectural analysis suggests this is a generation ship. There could be incredible historical data inside. An entire civilization's worth of knowledge just waiting to be discovered." Vixen felt the same excitement. This was why she had become a researcher, why she spent her life on the edges of explored space. The Thraxians valued knowledge above all else. It was their nature, their purpose. Where other species might have seen danger in this ancient derelict, they saw opportunity. "Prepare a boarding team," she ordered. "Full environmental suits and recording equipment. If this ship has been here that long, we owe it to history to document what we find." 3 hours later, Vixen and a team of 5 other researchers crossed the void between ships. Their suits' magnetic boots clanged against the derelict's hull as they made their way to what appeared to be an airlock. The design was strange, circular, and segmented in ways that didn't match any known architecture in the galactic database. Court worked on the access panel, his tools carefully prying open ancient systems. "The technology is incredibly advanced," he reported, his voice crackling through the communication channel. "In some ways more sophisticated than our current systems. Whoever built this was—" He trailed off as the airlock suddenly shuddered to life. Red lights flickered along its rim and the massive door began to cycle open with a grinding sound that vibrated through their suits. "I didn't do that," Court said, his voice uncertain. It activated on its own. Vixen should have ordered a retreat. Later she would realize that. She should have recognized the danger signs and pulled her team back to safety. But curiosity was the core of Thraxian nature, and the opening door promised answers to 10,000 cycles worth of questions. Stay alert, she said instead, and led her team into the darkness. The interior of the ship was vast, corridors stretching away in multiple directions. The same organic patterns covered the walls, and as Vixen's light swept across them, she realized with growing unease that they looked less like decorations and more like veins. Like the ship itself was a living thing. They moved deeper into the structure, recording everything. Empty chambers that might have been living quarters or storage bays. Massive rooms filled with technology they couldn't begin to understand. And everywhere those vein-like patterns, pulsing very faintly with a sickly green light. "Chief," one of the other researchers called out. "You need to see this." Vixen made her way to where the researcher stood before a large chamber. Inside, arranged in perfect rows, were thousands of pod-like structures. Each one was roughly the size of a Thraxian, and each one contained something. She approached the nearest pod and shone her light inside. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. It was a creature, but not like any she had ever seen. It had a body that seemed to be part insect, part machine, part something else entirely. Its carapace gleamed with metallic sheen, and tubes ran from its body into the pod's walls. Its eyes, dozens of them, were closed. Sleeping. "Chief, these readings." Court's voice was shaking. "These things are alive. All of them. Thousands of them in some kind of suspended animation. And Chief, the pods are starting to warm up." Vixen felt cold fear wash over her. "We need to leave. Now." But as she said it, the nearest pod cracked open with a hiss of ancient air. The creature inside stirred, its eyes opening one by one. They were black and hungry and utterly devoid of anything Vixen would call consciousness or mercy. "Run," she screamed. The team scattered, racing back toward the airlock. Behind them, more pods began to crack open. The ship, which had been silent and dead, suddenly thrummed with terrible life. Lights flickered on throughout its corridors, red and angry. And from the chambers they were fleeing. Vixen heard a sound that would haunt her nightmares, clicking. Thousands of creatures waking from their ancient sleep, clicking their mandibles in unison like some horrible machine warming up. Two of her team didn't make it to the airlock. Vixen heard their screams cut short as the creatures caught them. She and the remaining 3 researchers burst through the airlock and out onto the hull, their magnetic boots barely keeping them attached as they scrambled toward their shuttle. They made it aboard and sealed the door. Vixen's hands shook as she activated the engines and pulled away from the derelict. Behind them, the ancient ship was coming fully alive now, its engines ignited with green fire. Hatches across its surface opened and smaller ships began to pour out like insects from a disturbed hive. "Get me command," Vixen ordered. "Emergency priority. We have awakened something terrible." The response from Thraxian command came immediately. "Curiosity, this is command. We're tracking multiple objects launching from the derelict. What is their nature?" Vixen watched her sensors as dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of small ships spread out from the ancient vessel. They moved with perfect coordination, like a school of fish or a flock of birds, not like individual ships at all, but like parts of a single organism. "Command," she said, her voice barely steady. "We need to evacuate the outer colonies now. Whatever these things are, I don't think they're here to communicate." The first wave of creatures reached the nearest Thraxian colony exactly 4 hours later. The colony of Vextra was home to 3 million Thraxians, a peaceful farming and research settlement on a moon orbiting the system's 4th planet. The creatures, which the Thraxians were now calling devourers for lack of a better term, swept over the colony like a plague. They attached themselves to buildings, to ships, to the very ground itself, and they fed. The Thraxians watched in horror as the devourers consumed everything. Metal, organic matter, even the atmosphere itself seemed to be harvested by these things. They moved with frightening efficiency, working together in perfect harmony to strip the colony down to bare rock. The Thraxian defense forces responded as quickly as they could. 3 military vessels arrived at Vextra within 6 hours of the attack's beginning. But the Thraxians, like most galactic species, hadn't fought a real war in centuries. Their weapons were designed for policing, for defense against pirates and smugglers, not for large-scale warfare. The devourers overwhelmed them in minutes. The military vessels tried to retreat, but the swarm pursued. The creatures' ships moved faster than anything in the galactic database. They attacked not with weapons, but with themselves, latching onto the Thraxian vessels and literally eating through their hulls. One ship made it back to the homeworld. Only one out of 3. Its hull was pitted and scarred, its crew traumatized and desperate. The Thraxian Council convened immediately and sent out a call for help to the Galactic Assembly. This was beyond them. They needed support, needed the combined might of galactic civilization to face this threat. The Velkari were the first to respond. They sent a battle fleet of 20 ships, their finest military vessels crewed by their most experienced officers. The fleet arrived at the Thraxian system in 3 days and moved to engage the Devourers, who had by then consumed 2 more colonies and were spreading throughout the system. The battle was brief and catastrophic. The Velkari weapons couldn't penetrate the Devourers' adaptive shielding. Every time they found a frequency that worked, the creatures adjusted, evolved, overcame. The Velkari ships, designed for elegance and efficiency, couldn't withstand the brutal physical assault of thousands of Devourer craft, literally chewing through their hulls. 15 Velkari ships were destroyed. The remaining 5 retreated, their proud commanders forced to admit defeat. The Harmonics sent their defensive forces next. The crystalline beings created elaborate trap fields and defensive perimeters, using advanced mathematics and physics to create killing zones that should have annihilated any attacker. The Devourers adapted, learned, evolved. Within hours, they were moving through the trap fields as if they didn't exist. The Zuunda sent their collective consciousness pilots, beings who could react faster than any individual because they thought as one. But the Devourers thought as one too, and they had been doing it for millions of years. They outmaneuvered, outthought, and overwhelmed the Zuunda forces. One by one, the Thraxian colonies fell. Millions died, those who could evacuated to the homeworld. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Devourers reached the planet itself. In the capital city of Thrax Prime, in a bunker deep beneath the surface, a young Thraxian named Silva sat with her mother. Silva was only 8 cycles old, barely old enough to understand what was happening. She knew that bad things were attacking her world. She knew that people were dying. She knew that her mother was scared, even though she tried to hide it. The bunker shook as explosions rumbled somewhere above. The Devourers had reached the homeworld. The planet's defense grid was holding them off, but not for much longer. Silva's mother held her close, antennae wrapped protectively around her daughter. "It will be okay," she whispered. "The Council will save us. They have to." But Silva could hear the doubt in her mother's voice. In the command center 3 levels above them, the Thraxian military leaders watched their screens with growing despair. The Devourers were everywhere now, a swarm of millions spreading across their system like a cancer. Every colony was gone, every defensive platform destroyed. In a matter of days, this ancient horror had undone thousands of years of Thraxian civilization. "We need to send out a final message," Commander Tixal said quietly. His compound eyes were dim with exhaustion and grief. "We need to tell the galaxy what happened here, what these things are, so that if they spread beyond our system, others will have warning." "And a call for help?" his second asked. "Should we not beg one more time for aid?" Tixal's antennae drooped. "Who is left to ask? The Council forces have all retreated. No species has weapons capable of stopping these things. We are alone." But his second's antennae suddenly perked up. "Not all species," he said slowly. "There is one we haven't asked. One that the Council keeps in quarantine because they are too dangerous." Tixal understood immediately. The humans. "They are violent, unpredictable. They specialize in warfare. If anyone in the galaxy knows how to fight..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Tixal felt a chill run through his body. To ask the humans for help meant admitting that civilization had failed. It meant turning to the very species they had all feared and rejected. It meant showing weakness to beings that the galaxy considered barbaric. But his people were dying. His world was burning. And pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. "Send a message to human space," he ordered. "Tell them what is happening. Tell them we need help." "And if they refuse?" his second asked. "We have not been kind to them. We voted for their quarantine. We called them dangerous. Why would they help us?" Tixal had no answer to that. In her bunker, young Silva pulled away from her mother and walked to the communication terminal on the wall. It was set to emergency broadcast. able to send messages across all frequencies. Her mother tried to stop her, but Silva pushed her hands away. She pressed the transmit button and spoke, her young voice clear despite her fear. "Please, someone help us, anyone. They're killing everyone. Our ships are burning. Our cities are falling. The Council fleets tried to stop them, but they're not strong enough. Please, we're dying. If anyone can hear this, if anyone has mercy, please help us. We don't want to die, please." She released the button and looked at her mother with large, terrified eyes. "Will anyone come?" she asked. Her mother pulled her close again, holding her daughter as the world shook around them. "I don't know, little one. I don't know." The message broadcast out into space carried on all frequencies, reaching across the galaxy, and somewhere, in the darkness beyond the quarantine zone, someone heard it. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the briefing room of Defense Station Olympus, watching the transmission play for the 14th time. The Thraxian child's voice filled the room, desperate and young and terrified. Each time she heard it, something twisted in her chest. Around the long conference table sat the leaders of the United Earth Defense Force and representatives from the major colony worlds. Admiral Marcus Webb, Sarah's father, sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. He had brought this message home. He had forced them all to listen. "That's enough," Admiral Zhang said, raising a hand. The playback stopped, leaving silence in its wake. Zhang was old, older than most in the room, and he had been there during first contact. He had watched friends die because the galaxy misunderstood humanity's attempt at self-defense. "We've all heard it. The question is, what do we do about it?" "Nothing," Colonel Briggs said flatly. The scarred veteran leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "We do nothing. They made their choice when they quarantined us, when they called us monsters and locked us away from the rest of the galaxy. Now they're paying the price for forgetting how to fight." Several voices rose in agreement. Sarah watched her father's face and saw pain there, but also understanding. These were people who had suffered under the galactic community's prejudice. They had earned their anger. "They voted for every restriction against us," Commander Okafor added, his voice bitter. "The Thraxians specifically. They were among the loudest voices calling us dangerous. And now they want our help? Because we are dangerous," Sarah heard herself say. All eyes turned to her. She stood from her seat, placing her hands on the table. "They were right about us. We are dangerous. We are violent. We have been fighting each other since we lived in caves. We have more words for warfare than most species have for love." She paused, meeting each person's gaze. "But maybe they were only half right about what that means." "Commander Chen," Admiral Zhang said carefully, "what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that being dangerous isn't the same as being evil. I'm suggesting that violence isn't the same as cruelty. I'm suggesting that maybe the reason we're so good at warfare is because we needed to be, and maybe now someone else needs us to be." Briggs snorted. "You want to save them? After everything?" "I want to use what we are for something good," Sarah said. She gestured to the blank screen where the transmission had played. "That's a child. She doesn't care about galactic politics. She doesn't know anything about the quarantine or the restrictions or any of it. She just knows she's dying and she's scared." "So we should risk our people for someone else's child?" Briggs asked. "We should risk our people for any child," Sarah shot back. "Isn't that what we've always said makes us different? That we care? That we form bonds even with strangers? That we protect those who can't protect themselves? Or was that just propaganda we told ourselves to feel better about being outcast?" The room erupted in argument. Voices raised, people standing, old grievances and fresh wounds reopening. Sarah's father let it run for a minute before slamming his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the water glasses. "Enough," Marcus Webb said quietly, but his voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent. "I know what they've done to us. I spent 20 years begging them to see us as something other than monsters. 20 years of closed doors and turned backs. I know what we've lost because of their fear." He stood slowly, and Sarah saw that her father looked older than she remembered. The weight of those years hung on him like a physical thing. "I was there when they rejected our trade agreements. I watched them turn away our medical ships during the Velkari plague, even though we could have saved thousands. I stood in front of their council and pleaded for them to let human scientists share their research, and they laughed at me." His voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the pain beneath it. "I know every reason we have to let them burn." The room was utterly quiet now, but I also know that if we make that choice, if we decide that their fear justifies our indifference, then we prove them right. We prove that we are monsters. Not because we're violent, but because we chose not to care. With respect, Admiral, Briggs said, they never cared about us. No, Marcus agreed. They didn't, but we're not them. We're human. And that means something or it means nothing. He looked around the room. So what does it mean? Who are we? Are we the species that holds grudges? Are we the species that watches children die because their parents were cruel to us? Or are we something better? General Patricia Morrison, head of the Colonial Defense Fleet, spoke up. She was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes like flint. Admiral Webb, even if we wanted to help, we're talking about deploying a significant portion of our military assets outside the quarantine zone. If this goes wrong, if we take heavy casualties, our colonies will be vulnerable. We could be inviting our own destruction. Yes, Marcus said simply. That's the risk. And for what? Morrison pressed. The Thraxians won't suddenly love us because we saved them. The rest of the galaxy won't lift the quarantine. We'll still be the pariahs. Only now we'll be pariahs who gave up our strategic advantage to save people who despise us. Sarah saw her father's shoulders sag slightly, saw him age another year in that moment. But when he spoke, his voice was firm. Maybe you're right. Maybe nothing will change. But I think about that little girl on the transmission. I think about her mother, holding her in some bunker while their world burns. And I think about what my daughter said. He looked at Sarah, and she saw pride in his eyes. We have to be dangerous for something. Otherwise, what's the point? Captain Rodriguez from the carrier group stood. He was young for his rank, promoted after the skirmish with pirates at the Kepler colony. I vote we go, he said simply. Not for the Thraxians, not for the Council, but because it's the right thing to do. Slowly others began to stand. Commander Okafor, Admiral Jang, General Morrison, though Sarah could see the conflict on her face. We're really doing this, Briggs said. He shook his head, but he was standing too. We're really going to save the people who locked us away and called us animals. Yes, Marcus said. That's exactly what we're going to do. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. There were those who abstained, those who voted against, those who walked out rather than participate. But in the end, the majority voted to send help. As the meeting broke up and officers began coordinating the mobilization of the fleet, Sarah approached her father. Dad, she said quietly, what if they still hate us after this? What if we lose people and nothing changes? Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. Then at least we'll know we tried to be better than they thought we were. That's all we can do, Sarah, try to be better. The mobilization began immediately. Every military vessel in human space received the call. The carriers Indomitable and Defiance, the battleships Washington, Beijing, Lagos, and São Paulo, destroyer squadrons from a dozen colonies, Marines from Earth, Mars, Europa, and the outer settlements. Even civilian vessels volunteered, merchant ships retrofitted with weapon systems, mining vessels with their industrial equipment converted for combat use. In the hangar bay of Defense Station Olympus, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Park supervised the loading of her Marine unit's equipment. She was 32 years old and had never seen combat beyond training exercises and one brief pirate encounter. Now she was preparing to fight something that had destroyed multiple galactic fleets. Sarge! One of her Marines called out. Is it true? About the Thraxians? What about them? Jennifer asked, securing a crate of ammunition. That they're the ones who wanted to expand the quarantine zone. That they called us a plague on the galaxy. Jennifer paused in her work. Yeah, she said finally. That's true. So why are we helping them? She looked at the young Marine. He couldn't have been more than 20. Probably never even seen Earth, born on one of the colony worlds. This was the only life he knew, this isolation, this rejection. Because they need help, she said. And because someone has to show the galaxy that humanity is more than what they fear. What if we die out there? The Marine asked quietly. Then we die doing something that matters, Jennifer said. She went back to her work, but added, My grandmother was at the first contact incident. She was on the colony ship. She watched her friends die because of a misunderstanding. After that, she spent her whole life trying to bridge the gap, trying to make them see we weren't monsters. Jennifer secured the last crate and turned to face her unit. She died 5 years ago, still on the outside looking in. Never accepted, never welcomed, but she never stopped trying. So yeah, maybe we die out there, but at least we die trying to be what she always said we could be. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Engineers working around the clock to get every ship combat ready. Pilots running simulations against the limited data they had about the Devourers. Weapons officers loading ammunition designed for warfare on a scale humanity hadn't seen since the days before first contact. On Earth in Geneva, the seat of the United Earth Government, President Okonkwo addressed the planet. "Today we go to war," she said, her voice broadcast to every human settlement in every system. "Not for glory, not for conquest, not even for recognition. We go to war because somewhere in the galaxy people are dying, because a child cried out for help and we heard her, because being dangerous means we have the power to protect those who cannot protect themselves." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "The galaxy has feared us for 50 years. Let us give them something new to think about. Let us show them that yes, we are dangerous, but we are dangerous to those who prey on the weak. We are dangerous to those who would destroy the innocent. We are the monsters under the bed, and today, we're coming for the real monsters." On Defense Station Olympus, Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the Achilles. Around her, officers prepared for departure. Through the viewport, she could see dozens of other ships doing the same. The greatest assembly of human military might since the first contact incident. Her father's face appeared on the communication screen. He was on the carrier Indomitable, which would serve as the fleet's flagship. "Sarah," he said. "Admiral," she replied formally. "I'm proud of you. Your mother would be too." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Her mother had died during the first contact incident on that colony ship, fighting to protect her family from what she thought was an attack. "I hope we're doing the right thing," she said. "We are," Marcus said with certainty. "Maybe not the smart thing, maybe not the safe thing, but the right thing." The fleet began to move, ships peeling away from their docking points and forming up in attack formations. 53 military vessels and 22 armed civilian ships. Every weapon humanity could bring to bear. Every soldier, pilot, and marine willing to risk their lives for people who had never shown them kindness. As the fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, as the crews made their final preparations, the transmission played one more time. The Thraxian child's voice crying out across the void. "Please, someone help us, anyone." Sarah Chen sat in her command chair and gave the order. "Helm, plot a course for the Thraxian system. Maximum speed. Let's show them what humanity is really made of." The fleet jumped, disappearing into the spaces between spaces, racing toward a war that would define them, racing toward their answer to that child's plea, racing toward the day when the galaxy would learn that humanity was indeed dangerous. Just not in the way they thought. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thraxian system, and what they saw made even the most hardened veterans pause. 3 planets were burning. Not figuratively, but literally aflame, their atmospheres ignited by whatever the Devourers were doing to them. The space between planets was thick with debris, wrecked ships from multiple species, and clouds of what sensors identified as organic and metallic particles. The Devourers had been here for 2 weeks, and they had already reduced a thriving civilization to ruins. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Marcus Webb studied the tactical display with a grim expression. "Get me a count," he ordered. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, her voice tight. "Sensors are reading approximately 14 million individual Devourer ships. They're clustered around the homeworld. The galactic forces remaining are down to 17 vessels, all heavily damaged. They're in a defensive formation around what looks like the last evacuation convoy. 14 million. The number was staggering. The entire human fleet numbered 75 ships. "Sir, we're being hailed," communications reported. "It's the Velkari flagship Radiant Honor. They're demanding we leave the system immediately." Marcus almost laughed. Even now, even here, they wanted humanity to leave. "Put them through." A Velkari commander appeared on screen, his skin flashing the color of barely controlled panic. "Human vessels, you are in violation of the quarantine protocols. You must withdraw immediately. This situation is under galactic authority." "With respect, Commander," Marcus said calmly, "your authority appears to be burning along with everything else here. We received a distress call. We're responding. You have no authorization to be here. You have no authority to—" The Velkari commander's eyes widened as something off-screen caught his attention. "They're launching another wave. All ships, defensive pattern 7. We can't hold them. We can't—" The transmission cut off as his ship shuddered under attack. Marcus watched the tactical display as a wave of Devourer ships swept toward the galactic defensive line. Even from this distance, he could see the galactic ships were outmatched. Their weapons barely scratched the Devourer swarm, while the creatures simply overwhelmed them with numbers. All ships, Marcus broadcast to the human fleet. Battle stations. Weapons free. Show these things what it means to hunt humans. Commander Sarah Chen felt her heart hammering as the Achilles accelerated toward the battle. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, but she could see the fear in their eyes. Fear, but also determination. They had come to do a job. Devourer ships breaking off from the main swarm, Tactical reported. They're coming to investigate us. Countess, approximately 2,000 ships. 2,000 against their destroyer. The odds were absurd. Lock missiles, Sarah ordered. Target the densest cluster. Fire on my mark. The Achilles had been designed by humans for human warfare, where the galactic ships used elegant beam weapons and sophisticated targeting systems. Humanity had gone back to basics. Missiles. Lots of missiles. Hundreds of nuclear-tipped warheads that didn't care about adaptive shielding or energy frequencies. Fire, Sarah commanded. The Achilles shuddered as her entire missile payload launched in a single massive salvo. Across the fleet, other ships did the same. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the Devourer swarm. The creatures tried to adapt, tried to evolve their defenses like they had against the galactic weapons. But there was nothing to adapt to. Nuclear weapons didn't care about shields. They just obliterated everything in their blast radius. The detonations lit up space like a chain of stars being born. When the light faded, hundreds of Devourer ships were simply gone, vaporized by the raw destructive force of atomic fire. The remaining Devourers paused, and Sarah could have sworn she felt surprise from them, as if the concept of an enemy that would simply nuke them into oblivion was foreign to their experience. Then they adapted their tactics instead of their defenses, and they came at the human fleet like a tsunami. Brace for impact, Sarah called out as hundreds of Devourer ships closed in. Point defense full automatic. Don't let them touch the hull. The Achilles had point defense weapons that the galactic species considered crude. Rapid-fire rotary cannons that threw out thousands of rounds per minute. Simple, brutal, effective. They tore into the Devourer swarm, shredding the smaller ships. But there were so many of them. 3 Devourer ships made it through the defensive fire and latched onto the Achilles' hull. Sarah felt the ship shudder as the creatures began eating through the armor. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, damage control reported. Seal those sections, Sarah ordered. Then over the ship-wide channel, Marine teams to breach points. Treat them like a boarding action. In the corridors of the Achilles, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Park led her squad toward the hull breach on deck 4. They could hear the sound of tearing metal, could see the atmosphere venting through the widening hole. Through the breach, they could see the Devourer, a nightmare of chitin and metal working its way inside. Light it up, Jennifer ordered. Her Marines opened fire with everything they had. Not sophisticated energy weapons, but good old-fashioned bullets and explosives. The Devourer shrieked, a sound that vibrated through their bones and tried to push through into the corridor. Grenades, Jennifer called out. Her Marines threw a dozen high-explosive grenades into the breach. The explosions tore the Devourer apart and sealed the hole with its own corpse. Hull breach contained, Jennifer reported. 1 hostile eliminated. All across the human fleet, similar battles played out. Ships fighting at ranges measured in meters instead of kilometers. Marines repelling borders with small arms fire. Pilots ramming their damaged fighters into Devourer clusters. Engineering crews manually venting sections of ship to freeze out the creatures that got inside. It was brutal. It was bloody. It was exactly the kind of warfare humanity had refined over thousands of years. Admiral Webb watched the battle unfold and felt a cold satisfaction. The Devourers were adaptable, intelligent, and terrifying, but they had never fought humans before. They had never fought a species that specialized in warfare, that studied it, that treated it as both an art and a science. Sir, the Velkari flagship is hailing again, communications reported. The same commander appeared, but his expression was different now. Not hostile, but desperate. Human Admiral, they're breaking through our lines. The evacuation convoy is exposed. If you have any more of those weapons, now would be the time. Marcus nodded. Commander, pull your ships back. We're going to do something your species considers barbaric. He switched to fleet-wide channel. All ships converge on the evacuation convoy. Form a defensive sphere. Once in position, activate the Hawking Protocol. Sarah Chen felt ice run through her veins when she heard those words. The Hawking Protocol was humanity's most devastating weapon, and they had never used it in combat. Never had a reason to until now. You heard the Admiral, she told her crew. Take us into position, and somebody tell engineering to start praying. The human fleet formed up around the Thraxian evacuation convoy, a protective shell of warships surrounding the civilian vessels. The Devourers, sensing an easy target, converged on them in a massive swarm. Millions of ships forming a cloud that blocked out the stars. All ships report ready, Tactical announced. Marcus Webb took a deep breath. Activate the Hawking Protocol. Every human ship simultaneously overloaded their faster-than-light drives while still in normal space. It was suicide, technically. The drives were never meant to activate this way, but human engineers had discovered that if you did it just right, if you coordinated it perfectly, the overlapping FTL fields created a bubble of space where time moved differently, where everything inside moved very, very slowly. The Devourer swarm hit the field, and suddenly found themselves trapped in a bubble where time was moving at a fraction of normal speed. To them, it seemed like they were frozen. To the humans outside the field, the Devourers were sitting ducks. Fire everything, Marcus ordered. The human ships, circling the time bubble at full speed, poured every weapon they had into the trapped swarm. Missiles, railguns, lasers, even some experimental weapons that most galactic species considered too unstable to use. Everything. The Devourers tried to escape, but moving through the time field required more energy than they had. They were trapped, being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't reach. It lasted 5 minutes. 5 minutes of continuous bombardment. When the human ships finally exhausted their ammunition and shut down the Hawking Protocol, the Devourer swarm that had numbered in the millions was reduced to scattered thousands. The remaining Devourers pulled back, regrouping around their mothership. The ancient derelict that the Thraxians had awakened was still there, still functioning, still producing more Devourers to replace those lost. But the immediate threat to the evacuation convoy was over. Sarah Chen slumped in her command chair, exhausted. Around her, the bridge crew were checking systems, counting casualties, assessing damage. The Achilles had taken a beating. They all had. Casualty reports coming in, her XO said quietly. 15 ships heavily damaged. 3 destroyers lost with all hands. Estimated total casualties at 4,000. 4,000 dead. Sarah closed her eyes. 4,000 humans who had volunteered to save people who had called them monsters. Admiral Webb is hailing all ships, communications reported. Marcus's face appeared on screen. He looked as exhausted as Sarah felt, but his voice was strong. All vessels, status report. Can we continue the fight? One by one, the ships reported in. Damaged, depleted, exhausted, but functional. They could fight. The mothership is still producing more Devourers, Marcus said. If we don't destroy it, this continues forever. They'll rebuild their swarm and start again. We need to take it down. Sir, Captain Rodriguez of the carrier group said. That ship is massive. We've expended most of our heavy ordnance. We don't have the firepower to crack it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we don't need to crack it. We just need to get inside it and blow it apart from within. I'm calling for volunteers. 1 ship skeleton crew. We ram the mothership, fight our way to its core, and detonate our reactor. Whoever goes won't be coming back. The fleet channel was silent. Then Sarah Chen spoke. Achilles volunteers, sir. We've already taken heavy damage. Might as well make it count. Negative, Commander, Marcus said. The Indomitable will make the run. I'm not sending anyone anywhere I wouldn't go myself. Dad, no, Sarah started. Sarah, that's an order, Marcus said gently. Besides, someone needs to make sure the convoy gets home safely. The Achilles is still combat capable. The Indomitable has structural damage to her FTL drive. We can't jump to safety anyway. He smiled, and Sarah saw her father as she remembered him from childhood. Strong and steady and brave. Make sure they know what we did here. Make sure the galaxy understands that humanity answered the call. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she saluted. Yes, sir. The Indomitable broke formation and accelerated toward the mothership. On board, Admiral Marcus Webb walked through corridors that were more patched than original hull, past damage control teams and exhausted crew members, making his way to the bridge. He had ordered all non-essential personnel to evacuate to other ships. Most had refused. They had come this far together. They would finish it together. The mothership's defenses opened fire, but the Indomitable didn't even try to dodge. She took the hits, armor ablating away, compartments venting to space, but she kept coming. Like a missile. Like a bullet. Like human stubbornness made manifest. "All hands," Marcus said over the ship-wide channel. "Brace for impact. It's been an honor serving with you." The Indomitable slammed into the mothership's hull at full speed. The impact drove her deep into the structure, crumpling her bow, killing dozens in an instant. But it also breached the mothership's interior, creating a wound that wouldn't heal. Marcus pulled himself out of his command chair, tasting blood. Around him, the bridge was a wreck, but the reactor was still intact. That was all that mattered. He made his way to engineering, joining the skeleton crew that had stayed behind. Together, they began the process of overloading the reactor while devourers poured into the breached sections of ship, trying to stop them. Marines held the corridors, fighting and dying to buy time. Engineers worked with hands that shook from exhaustion, routing power, bypassing safeties, pushing the reactor past every safety limit. Marcus helped where he could, but mostly he stood and watched his crew work. These were humans, violent, dangerous, emotional humans, and they were dying to save people who had never seen their worth. "Reactor critical," the chief engineer reported. "We have 60 seconds. All personnel evacuate," Marcus ordered. "Get to the escape pods." "That's an order." No one moved. "Sir," the chief engineer said. "With respect, we all volunteered for this. We knew what it meant. We're seeing it through." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He wanted to order them to save themselves. But he understood. They had made their choice. "Then let's finish this together," he said. The reactor reached critical mass and detonated. The explosion tore through the mothership's core, destroying its central systems, its production facilities, its ancient sleeping mind. The blast propagated through the entire massive structure, and within seconds the ship that had spawned millions of devourers was breaking apart. The remaining devourer swarm, suddenly cut off from their controlling intelligence, went dormant, just stopped floating in space like puppets with cut strings. In the Achilles, Sarah Chen watched her father's ship disappear in a flash of light that briefly outshone the burning planets. She didn't realize she was screaming until her XO put a hand on her shoulder. "Commander," he said quietly, "the convoy is ready to jump to safety. They're waiting for our escort." Sarah wiped her eyes and straightened in her chair. Her father had given her an order. She would follow it. "All ships," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Form up on the convoy. Let's bring these people home." The human fleet, battered and bloodied but victorious, began the long journey back to Thraxian space with the survivors they had saved. Behind them, the devourers floated silent and dead in the darkness. The monsters had been defeated by monsters of a different kind. The human fleet limped into Thraxian space 3 days after the battle. They had lost 18 ships total, including the Indomitable. Casualty counts put the dead at over 6,000, with twice that many wounded. Every surviving ship bore scars, patched hull breaches, jury-rigged systems barely holding together. But behind them came the evacuation convoy. 200 Thraxian civilian ships carrying 3 million survivors. 3 million people who would have died if humanity hadn't answered their call. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Achilles, watching as they approached the Thraxian homeworld. Or what was left of it. The devourers had reached the surface before the human fleet arrived. Whole cities were gone, continents scarred, but the planet itself had survived. That was something. "Commander, we're being hailed by Thraxian Command," her communications officer reported. "They're requesting permission to broadcast your response across all frequencies." "The entire galactic community is watching," Sarah nodded slowly. "The entire galaxy. Watching to see what the dangerous humans would do now that they had proved their worth in blood. "Put them through," she said. The face that appeared on screen was Commander Tixall, the Thraxian military leader, who had sent the original call for help. His compound eyes were dim with exhaustion, but he stood straight, formal. "Commander Chen of Earth," he began, his voice carrying through the translation field. "On behalf of the Thraxian people, I must speak words that do not come easily to my species. We were wrong about humanity. We judged you by your nature and not your character. We called you dangerous and locked you away, and when our own danger came, you answered anyway. You lost thousands of your people, saving millions of ours. There is no adequate thanks for this. There is no way to repay such a debt." Sarah felt the weight of his words. She thought about her father, about the indomitable, about all the humans who had died in the darkness between stars. She thought about the years of rejection, of isolation, of being called monsters by the very people who now owed them everything. "Commander Tixall," she said, and her voice was steady. "We didn't come for repayment. We didn't come for recognition. We came because you needed help and we could provide it. That's what we do. That's what we are. But the cost," Tixall said, his antennae drooping. "So many of your people gave their lives for us. For strangers who had shown you nothing but contempt." Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, she chose her words carefully, knowing that every species in the galaxy was listening. "My father once told me that being dangerous means having the power to hurt people, but being good means choosing not to use that power except to protect those who can't protect themselves. He died proving that. 6,000 humans died proving that." She paused. "So yes, we're dangerous. You were right about that, but you were wrong about what that means. We're not dangerous to those who need help. We're dangerous to those who threaten the helpless." Tixall bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect in Thraxian culture. "The galaxy will hear this. The galaxy will understand." The transmission ended, but Sarah knew her words were already spreading across the galactic networks. Every species, every world hearing humanity explain itself not with pleas for acceptance, but with simple truth. The Thraxian homeworld opened its orbital space to the human fleet. Medical ships came up to take the wounded. Supply vessels offered food, fuel, and materials for repairs. It was the first time in 50 years that humanity had been welcomed in galactic space. Sarah ordered her crew to accept the help. They needed it. On the surface of Thrax Prime, in the capital city that had been partially destroyed by the Devourer attack, an emergency session of the Galactic Council convened. Representatives from every species assembled, but this time, there was an empty space at the center of the chamber, a space reserved for humanity. Ambassador Krelix of the Velkari stood at his podium, but his colors were muted, subdued. Gone was the arrogant confidence from before. "I call this session to order," he said quietly. "We gather in the shadow of disaster and salvation. The Thraxian civilization stands because humanity, the species we quarantined and rejected, chose to save them." A harmonic representative chimed, its crystalline voice carrying shame. "We sent our fleets. We tried to help. But our weapons, our tactics, our entire way of warfare proved insufficient. We had evolved beyond conflict, we thought. We had transcended the need for violence. The Devourers taught us the price of that evolution. The humans did what we could not," Azunda Avatar added, its collective voice sober. "They fought with a brutality that horrified us. They used weapons we consider barbaric. They employed tactics we find disturbing. And they won. They saved millions of lives using methods we had condemned them for possessing." Krelix's skin flashed a deep blue, the color of regret. "I was wrong," he said, and the admission clearly pained him. "I have spent 50 cycles arguing that humanity was too dangerous for galactic society. I was the loudest voice calling for their isolation. And when my own people faced annihilation, when our ships were burning and our worlds dying, it was the humans who saved us." Velkari ships limped home in defeat. Human ships stayed and fought until the threat was eliminated. The chamber was silent. The admission hung in the air like a physical thing. "We called them monsters," Krelix continued. "We were not wrong about their capacity for violence. But we failed to understand that violence itself is not evil. It is merely a tool. And in the right hands, wielded for the right reasons, it can be the tool that saves civilizations." The Thraxian representative, an elder named Vixen who had survived the research vessel that accidentally awoke the Devourers, stood slowly. "I propose," she said, "that the quarantine against humanity be lifted immediately, that all trade restrictions be removed, that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges, and that a formal apology be issued for 50 years of unjust treatment." The vote was called. It was unanimous. 3 weeks later, a memorial was unveiled on Thrax Prime. It stood in the center of the rebuilt capital, a towering structure of metal and crystal that caught the light of the system's sun and threw it in rainbow patterns across the plaza. Carved into its base were 6,000 names. Human names. Those who had died saving a species that had called them dangerous. At the top, in letters that could be seen from orbit, was a simple inscription in both human and Thraxian languages. They came when called. They fought when needed. They died so others could live. This is humanity. The dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from every galactic species. They came to pay their respects, to acknowledge their debt, to witness the truth of what humanity had done. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the memorial with what remained of her crew. The Achilles was in dry dock being repaired, but she had come down to the surface for this. She felt she owed it to her father, to all those who hadn't made it home. Young Silva, the Thraxian child whose transmission had started everything, approached Sarah slowly. She was with her mother, both of them survivors of the siege. The child looked up at the memorial, at the thousands of names carved in stone, and then looked at Sarah with large, solemn eyes. "You're Commander Chen," Silva said. "Your father was the admiral. He was on the ship that destroyed the bad things." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Yes," she managed. "He was. I'm sorry he died," Silva said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "He saved us. All of you saved us. The grown-ups say you were dangerous and that's why you were locked away. But you came anyway." "We did," Sarah said. Silva was quiet for a moment, her antennae twitching the way Thraxian children's did when they were thinking hard about something. "I heard someone say that humans are monsters. Are you a monster?" Sarah looked at this child, this young life that existed because humans had chosen to fight. She thought about the question, about the weight of it, about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had feared them. "Sometimes," Sarah said finally, "when someone I care about needs a monster on their side." Silva considered this, then reached out and took Sarah's hand in her small, chitinous one. "Thank you for being our monster." Sarah looked down at the small hand holding hers and felt something break inside her. Not something bad, something that had been too rigid, too hardened by years of rejection. She knelt down to Silva's level. "You're welcome," she said softly. "Anytime you need us." The ceremony continued. Speeches were made by galactic leaders, formal apologies issued, promises of friendship and cooperation declared. But Sarah barely heard them. She stood there holding a child's hand, feeling the weight of what humanity had accomplished. They hadn't changed what they were. They were still violent, still dangerous, still capable of terrible things, but they had shown the galaxy that those traits could be wielded with honor, with compassion, with purpose. Later that day, Sarah attended a private meeting with the surviving human command staff and representatives from the Galactic Council. They gathered in a conference room overlooking the memorial, and for the first time in 50 years, humans and aliens sat at the same table as equals. "The Council has voted to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity," Krelix announced. "We will be opening embassies on Earth and the major colony worlds. Trade agreements are being drafted. Educational exchanges are being proposed. There is much work to be done to repair 50 years of isolation. But there is one thing we must address first," the Velkari added, his colors shifting to a somber purple. "We have spent half a century teaching our children that humans are dangerous, that they are to be feared and avoided. We cannot simply erase that overnight. There will be prejudice. There will be resistance. Some will not forget the fear so easily." "We understand," General Morrison said. She had arrived from Earth to represent the human government. "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. We don't expect you to suddenly love us because we saved the Thraxians. But we do expect respect," Sarah added quietly. "We've earned that much," Krelix nodded. "You have earned far more than respect, Commander. You have earned our gratitude, our friendship, and our acknowledgement that we were wrong. The question now is, how do we move forward?" The meeting lasted hours. Plans were made, agreements drafted, frameworks established. Humanity would be integrated into galactic society slowly, carefully, with both sides learning to work together. But the foundation had been laid. The Thraxian incident had changed everything. Months passed. The human fleet returned home to a celebration that lasted for weeks. Parades in every major city on Earth and the colonies. Memorials built on every world. The dead honored, the wounded cared for, the survivors celebrated as heroes. But Sarah knew the real change wasn't in the celebrations. It was in the small things. It was in the Velkari trade ship that docked at the Mars orbital station, its captain nervous but willing to do business. It was in the Thraxian students who applied to attend universities on Earth, wanting to learn from the species that had saved them. It was in the joint research projects, the cultural exchanges, the slow building of bridges that had been burned 50 years ago. It was in the children of both species, playing together in parks on colony worlds, not seeing monsters or aliens but just other kids. 1 year after the battle, Sarah Chen was promoted to admiral and given command of the first Joint Human Galactic Task Force. Its mission was to patrol the outer sectors, protecting the younger species who were just now joining the galactic community, standing ready in case something like the Devourers ever threatened again. Her flagship was a new vessel, built with combined human and galactic technology, tough human engineering married to elegant alien design. They named it the Indomitable, in honor of the ship that had made the ultimate sacrifice. On the day they launched, Sarah stood on the bridge and looked out at her crew. Humans, yes, but also Thraxians, Velkari, even a few Harmonics and Zuunda. Different species working together, learning from each other, protecting each other. All stations report ready, her XO said. He was a young Thraxian named Court, one of the researchers who had survived the initial Devourer awakening. He had joined the military after the battle, saying he wanted to make sure his people never forgot the cost of being unprepared. Then let's show them what we can do together, Sarah said. Helm, take us out. The Indomitable launched, her engines burning bright as she headed for the dark spaces between stars. Behind her, a dozen other ships followed, a fleet of mixed species working in harmony. The galaxy had called humans dangerous. They had been right. But they had learned that humanity's danger was never to those who needed protection. It was to those who threatened the innocent, to those who would harm the helpless, to those who thought civilizations could be consumed without consequence. The galaxy had called humans monsters. They had been right about that too. But they had finally understood what monsters were for. And on distant Thrax Prime, in a plaza where a memorial stood carved with 6,000 names, a young girl named Silva would sometimes bring flowers. She would stand before the monument and remember the day the monsters came to save her world. She would remember and she would smile, and she would tell anyone who would listen about the day humanity answered when no one else would. About the day the dangerous species proved that danger and evil were not the same thing. About the day humans showed the galaxy what it truly meant to be civilized, not in avoiding violence, but in knowing when violence was righteous. Not in being safe, but in using strength to protect the weak. Not in forgetting how to fight, but in choosing who to fight for. The galaxy had feared humanity for 50 years. Now they understood that fear had been misplaced. They should have feared being humanity's enemy. Because being humanity's friend meant having the most dangerous species in the galaxy standing at your side, ready to fight your battles, ready to die for your protection, ready to be the monsters that the real monsters feared. And that, Silva would think as she stood before the memorial, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not more peace lovers, more people willing to fight for peace.